Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Hello, in the last lecture we discussed the principles of plotted housing. In this lecture we will discuss the principles of group housing. In the principles of the plotted housing we discussed how we can approach for the planning of the plotted housing of a large chunk. We discussed that two approach could be taken. One is a hierarchical approach where we can distribute or divide the whole population into various clusters, and we define the clusters in terms of very specific facilities and open recreational areas. Another approach is we do not divide as per the clusters, we just place the plots in such a fashion that in a centralized green areas or centralized open facilities can be provided to provide the essential facility to all the plots equitably in a different type of different manner. And not only that, we also discussed that how we can determine the plot size in a plotted housing. We told that if the total population is given by the housing strategy for a large chunk or a neighborhood level, dividing the population with the household, we can find out the total number of dwelling units, and that dwelling units can be converted to various proportion of the higher income group, middle income group and low income group to determine the exact number of plots required for each economic group. And then we can also calculate the size of the plot and its total number of the plot for each dwelling unit and place and provide. Now for the plotted housing, apart from the placement of the facility and the open space, another very important factor is the network. Now we told that few example or few principles we discussed, like in the periphery we should not make more number of puncture in the local road and in the very close vicinity, so that it makes it does not make accident and the risk prone areas, but inside the neighborhood where only local roads meets with local road, those kind of areas it can be done. Second, we discussed that the number of junctions in the periphery will be less, and inside the neighborhood number of junctions will be more, it can be more, and division or the segregation of the vehicular and non-vehicular traffic. And for the non-vehicular traffic like the pedestrians we can make separate punctures, separate pathways for the non-vehicular movement. Now one disadvantage of the plotted housing is that plotted housing, though it provides a very individual kind of ownership to the end user, and you enjoy your sole ownership and freedom to design, build and enjoy your own house, but one difficulty is that at the planning level the density is very less, because for each and every plot you have to provide the road, you have to provide the open space and the facilities. So since the density is less, your overall cost of the plot becomes higher, so it is less affordable. So only the people who are in the higher income group or middle income group, they can only afford the plotted housing when the plotted housing is built inside the city. But if yes, in the periphery and also in the rural areas, poor people can afford the plotted housing. Another disadvantage of the plotted housing is that since the plotted housing is, when it is plotted, you cannot play with its orientation too much. So whatever is the orientation of the plot you have considered, maybe one or two orientation you can play with, but by and large you have to keep the orientation for the whole neighborhood. Maybe one or two variations you can achieve. this types of disadvantage can be overcome in the group housing. So, in the group housing we are not going to give the individual plot to any people. So, we are going to make a overall design of the plot overall in terms of the building. So, in the plotted housing the size of the plot is smaller, in a group housing size of the plot is very big. Here the number of dwelling unit is 1 or 2, but here it is a group, and basic difference is what I told earlier, that here the building and land both are owned by the individual person or the end user, but here the building is owned by the individual person, but land is not owned, land is owned by the community. That is why it is called as a group housing, right. So, this is the plotted housing, and this is the group housing. Now, how do we make the group housing? In the plotted housing our basic objective was to consider the total number of the plots which can be calculated from the total population which is given by the master plan or the housing strategy, then accommodate those many of the plots. But in the group housing our approach could be little different, like if this is the plot of the group housing given or given after the land subdivision exercise in a housing strategy, and it is told that, say for example this is say 12 hectare of land, right, and it is told that in 12 hectares of land we have to accommodate say 10,000 people, right, 10,000 people. So, our objective will be the out of 10,000 people, if we consider at the rate of 5% per family or per household, so it becomes 10,000 divided by 5, so 2000 unit, 2000 unit. Now, this is the total number of units we have to accommodate in terms of total number of units. Now, these units could be accommodated in one building, theoretically can be 2 building, 3 building, 4 building. So, various permutations and combinations are possible based on the variables. So, here your variables are number of the buildings, number of the building complexes, number of the floors or the building height. So many variables are possible. So, based on the so many variables you can make different kind of options. Now, concept of FAR could be FAR or FSI could be brought back here. For example, consider that FAR provided in this particular plot is 1.5. Therefore, total built up area becomes, so if 12 hectare is the total area of the land, so 12 hectare is equal to this meter square into 1.5, it becomes meter square. Now, consider that this is the total built up area and this is the total number of unit. So, area per unit will be total built up area divided by number of, that is right. So, this becomes the average area per unit. Now, this is based on the assumption that you are designing 2000 unit and you are making all the units uniform and uniform uniform this when the total built up area is 1,80,000 meter squares. So, in this case it is 90 meter square, but take an example that you are in a group housing project, definitely all the units will not be uniform, there will be variation. Even if the project is done for the higher income group or any particular group like middle income group, within that particular economic group there could be various kinds of options. Now, let us assume that you are taking 3 typologies, type A, B and C. So, type A, for example, you are taking 120 meter square, and type B say 100 meter square, and type C 80 meter square, right. So, based on that you can calculate by using simple mathematics that if the number is, this is the type and this is the number. So, simply right. So, based on this, if you can consider that what is the proportion of A, now this NA, NB, NC you can consider is to NB is to NC is equal to, say for example we can consider some ratio 1 say 2:3:4. So, if this is known, this can be considered or assumed as per your requirement or as per your intention of the project or as per the target of the project, target population of the project. So, you can calculate the NA, NB, NC using simple mathematics, and those amount of numbers will have to be accommodated in this particular area. Now this is the quantitative part of the planning of the whole complex, but how to accommodate, how many buildings will be there. So, there are few variables, like it could be accommodated in one building or multiple building. So, your decision on the number of building, number of floor, in a building, and the number of unit in a so this is the number of building, how many building will be there, right. Number of floors in a building, if this is one building, what is the floor number, n number of floor, number of unit in a building floor, like if this is the floor plan. So, there could be 4 unit which is served by a common lift core, there could be 6 unit which can be served by a like this. So, based on the different kind of permutation and combination, what is the number of units in a building floor. So, making a combination and permutation of different kind of possibilities and the options, you can make 2-3 scenarios and you can choose one scenario. So, that is a quantitative part, this can be done, but there is no directly formula which will guide you that what is the exact number of the floor or exact number of the building or number of the building floor. Now, it like the building height is determined by the maximum height is determined by your building regulations, and there are building regulation related to setback, related to joint open space, related to fire regulation, everything. So, considering all those things, you have to determine the number of building, number of floor, number of unit, etc. So, there is no shortcut or no straightforward formula. Only one thing can be told, that you can make several options, and out of the options you can choose 1 or 2. Now, let us discuss that how, after deciding on the number of building block, number of the floors, number of the units, we need that this much number of building and the building profile, the how many blocks will be provided. For example, in this case you are finding that 16 number of building block has to be accommodated. Now 16 number of buildings could be accommodated in a hierarchic manner like we discussed in the plotted housing, where if all the buildings can enjoy a common open space, or it can be like this, like this. And there could be a centralized large facility. So this could be one approach by which we can distribute the buildings and its facilities and connect it. So this could be one approach. Similarly with the plotted housing, another approach could be that we may not distribute based on the hierarchy, but we make a common common facility area and place the building around the facility, so that each building gets the maximum advantage of the large facility as well. So this could be another approach. Here this set of building, they are deprived of getting the facility of the large open space like playground or large facility, but here every building can have the visual connection or the advantage of the bigger facility. So this could be another approach, similarly like plotted housing. So in group housing mostly you will find this kind of approach, because the advantage in this approach is that you can orient your building as per your site requirement. For example, the site could be very much irregular. Usually we try to get the regular plots, but in practical field you will find very irregular site like this. So based on this irregular site feature, you can orient your building accordingly, and this can create very interesting pattern, very interesting form and very interesting build form, which will enhance the light, ventilation, wind flow, everything in a particular project. So this kind of approach could be taken. So first in this discussion, the first principle is how you are placing the blocks. So placement of the blocks can be done at the hierarchical approach, and placement of the blocks can be done at the individual approach, keeping the centralized facilities and reorienting the building in their own fashion to increase or to maximize the light, ventilation and wind flow. Second principle which can be discussed is that how in a group housing project you are considering or integrating the vehicular and non-vehicular movement. One very distinguishable parameter or feature in the group housing than the plotted housing is that in group housing, since there is no boundary of the plot, apart from the external boundary, inside there is no boundary. So every person can reach to every block, every facility, every open areas. But in the plotted housing, everybody cannot enter the facilities in the other plot, but here it is just reverse. Everybody can go anywhere. It is a free area in the group housing context. So in this context, our objective will be that the non-vehicular movement, that is the pedestrian movement. So pedestrian should be given the opportunity to move freely along the open space, along the beside the building and all the facilities area, whereas the vehicular movement should touch the building blocks and facilities and also parking areas. But the vehicular access may not touch the open areas, recreational areas, but open areas or recreational areas must be connected with the pedestrian approach. So, pedestrian access is very important. So, one approach to segregate or integrate the vehicular and the non-vehicular approach is, in a plot we can make the vehicular, if this is the road, we can make the vehicular pathway at the periphery, and we can have the non-vehicular movement at the center, and keeping some of the interface area between the non-vehicular and vehicular movement. This can be one approach. That means in the periphery you have the vehicular movement, in the centralized open area and the facility area you are having the free flow of the pedestrians, and some of the designated point you are allowing the interface area where you can load, unload, or where you can get down from the cars and come to the open space area, and building could be placed suitably inside the area. So, central space could be utilized for your green, recreational and the facilities area. Another approach could be the divided approach. If this is the plot, you can divide, you can have a vehicular movement like this, and your that is also possible, that your non-vehicular or pedestrian movement is around the building, so that they can see outside, have the these are the building block provided suitably, and inside the two set of building, if these are the two set of the building, then inside the building you are making a vehicular, only one vehicular access, giving access to all the building. So, here the advantage is that vehicular access, since vehicular access or the pavement or the road is a very costly element. So, instead of giving a very large amount of road, you are giving a very nominal road just to give the access to the building, but you are allowing the non-vehicular or the pedestrian approach in each and every building and facility area. But definitely you have some kind of interface area where you have to have the very specific engineering design to integrate the vehicular and non-vehicular interface. Now, based on this, let us see some of the examples, so that you understand in a better way some of the example. So, this elements we have discussed, that group housing has the community ownership of the land, individual family ownership of the apartment, lesser road requirement, more density is possible to achieve using the higher FAR than the plotted housing. This is one example of segregated or the distributed in a hierarchical fashion. You can see various clusters are developed. This is one cluster, this is another cluster. Every cluster is having one centralized green areas inside the cluster, but apart from the cluster, there are a large amount of area which is having the other facilities, common facilities, which is shared by the group housing. So, this is one example. You can see how the clusters are formed around a small green areas. Another thing, you can see that this is the vehicular access for the roads, and these are the pedestrian pathway, how the pedestrian pathways are integrated with the green space, and these are the interface area where the pedestrian pathway is meeting with the vehicular area. So, this kind of design or the planning interventions could be taken. Let us see another example. In this example, you can see that this is the vehicular access. In this vehicular access from the major, from this major vehicular access, this is the secondary vehicular access, and inside the complexes only the pedestrian movements and the green areas and facilities are provided. You can see the pedestrian movement is possible, but in the periphery the roads are there, the vehicular movements are there. Similarly, here you can see that inside the building, inside the campus or inside the complex, you can have the pedestrian movement, and some of the areas have the interface with the pedestrian and the vehicular areas. Some of the areas you can see that there is a connection between the pedestrian and the vehicular movement. So, this could be done if it is designed considering the cluster approach. So, this could be one cluster, this could be another cluster, this could be another cluster, but the size of the cluster here is much bigger than the size of cluster of the earlier example, like this. Here the cluster was little smaller, but here the cluster is bigger. Now, let us see an example where all the buildings are placed around a large open space and facility like this. This is the project which was done, the first project done as a public private partnership in India, in Kolkata, in the city of Kolkata. You can see that this part is done for the higher income group, this part of the project is done for the middle income group, and this part of the project is done for the lower income group. And the buildings are provided in the periphery, keeping the green areas and the facilities in the central areas, so that everybody can come and take the advantage of the green areas, whereas the vehicular access is given at the peripheral access, and the central green areas gives an opportunity for the pedestrian to roam around or to enjoy the green areas. At the same time, they can come to the vehicular area as well. So, this is the peripheral road, this is the peripheral road. There are 1, 2, 3 entry. So, from 3 entry from the major road is there. So, from this example you can understand that how suitably the distribution of the land for the higher income group, middle income group and lower income group can be given, and considering the centralized green area and open space as a centralized facility also could be designed. This is the view of the this particular green area. The large buildings are surrounding the green areas. These are the HIG blocks. This is another project by the same joint venture company, designed by famous architect B.V. Doshi. Here also you can see that a irregular parcel of land, how the land parcel is irregular, and based on the irregular land parcel, how the designer has planned the complex in such a way so that the centralized green open space become a continuous trail of combination of pedestrians and vehicular movement, and a free flow movement is possible. And the building blocks, these are the similar building blocks, they are placed in such a way, considering the profile of the boundary profile of the site. At the same time, it is taking the optimized utilization of the profile and also creating a very interesting build form inside the project. These are the building blocks of middle income group, and these are the building block for the higher income group. So, also from this example you can understand that how the vehicular and the pedestrian movement can be separated out. Even the plot is a very irregular and long and kind of a very uncertain kind of a plot profile. See this example. In this example you can see that though the plot is having a regular profile, but within the regular profile this is the vehicular access, and the inside green area this is the pedestrian approach, how the pedestrian interface is there with the vehicular approach. Some of the areas, these are the shaded areas, and in this approach also the centralized green areas giving the access or the view to all the building blocks. Apart from the group housing and the plotted housing, so these are some example we have shown. Few more example I must request you that you see from the websites. Lot of projects are there in the website, those are available. So, please go through all these sites, see very intricately, very minutely all the planning of the campuses of the group housing, see how the open spaces are distributed, how the access from the vehicular road is given, see how the access from the pedestrians pathway is given, how the interface between the pedestrian pathway and the vehicular pathway is maintained. So, there is no shortcut or kind of a formula which can dictate you or which can teach you that this could be the layout of the planning. But if you consider few thumb rule, as we discussed, that the approach could be in the cluster based or hierarchy based, or approach could be centralized based. So this kind of approach could be taken for any group housing. Now apart from the group housing project, there could be few projects which can accommodate group housing and plotted housing together to make a very heterogeneous but a very integrated campus. So in a mixed use or composite development, there could be a composition of plotted and group housing. So here you can accommodate large variety of population. Urban design is challenging, and variety of open space and units are possible if you make a composite development. So this is one of the example taken from a very popular project. You can see that the central portion of the project is devoted to a group housing, whereas the periphery is devoted to the plotted housing development. So this is one example of a composite development. Now let us summarize the type of development. In plotted housing, basically your land ownership is the private, but in group housing the land ownership is held by the community or the public body. Here the density could be achieved which is lesser. In the group housing we can achieve more density. The community and public open space is lesser, where we can achieve more, because here we do not have the open space given for each and every plot, each and every unit. So all the open space has merged and creating a large amount of open space. Private garden and open space, sometimes we give private garden to the group housing in the ground floor units, but yes, for the plotted housing every plot can have their own small areas, small gardens. Variety of open spaces could be lesser because the community open space is less, more amount of land is given for the plots, but here the community open space is more because all the open spaces are clubbed together to make a bigger amount of open space. And hierarchy of open space can be defined, semi-defined or undefined. Similarly, it can be semi-defined and undefined, but here in the group housing usually the defined hierarchy open space is not possible, not seen, whereas in the plotted housing we see largely the defined housing, defined hierarchy, defined periphery of the open space. So in the next next lecture we will discuss the strategy for community development in housing. So after the discussion of the plotted housing and group housing, next lecture we will discuss that how a community is important, and based on the community development how we can strategize few other typologies of the housing in a new housing areas of a city. So thank you for today.